Welcome to the Plant Cunning Podcast,
where we explore a relationship to plants, other people, and the mysteries of nature.
Coming to you from the high Allegheny Plateau in central New York.
We are your hosts, A.C. Staubel
and Isaac Hill. Episode 72, Peter Mark Adams and the Power of the Healing Field. In this episode, we speak with author, occultist, and energy healer Peter Mark Adams about all the different modalities that healers have at their disposal to work with subtle energies. From EFT, which is simple and can be learned in 15 minutes and has helped veterans of Vietnam remedy PTSD, to Reiki, mind connection healing, and many others. We talk about different states of consciousness, from rational to intuitive, empathetic, psychic, to unitive mystical states. We talk about entity attachment and removal, about why an attitude of service is necessary for true spiritual growth, and that nebulous concept of the field and the ethical underpinnings of it. Now, there is a video option for this episode on YouTube and I think on Spotify too, and Peter shares with us a number of slides and graphics. So if you want to check those out, go to YouTube and we're Plant Cunning. Or check the video option on Spotify.
There's also a really special event that's coming up for plant lovers that we're thrilled to share with you all as well. It's happening this spring equinox, and it's an online summit hosted by our friend, Sarah Artemisia, who was on the show for episode 36, where we talked about flower essences and the Akashic Records, and some of her experience with the magic of plants. So definitely check that episode out if you haven't heard it yet. But the Plant Spirit Herbalism Summit is an online event where Sarah interviews some of the most amazing, well-respected herbalists and mentors in the herbal community and creates a community of us, the viewers and attendees, to really experience some of the magic of plants together. And so it's a free event to join live, and then there's an option to purchase the recordings for just $57 if you want the all-access pass. And last year during the summit, I really enjoyed it. I wish that I could have seen every single episode and kind of wish that I did get the all-access pass, but I remember when Anjanae Wilson, who we also interviewed, was sharing her experience about her glow up and rose, I sort of had this like trippy experience. Like I felt like I was just like connecting with the spirit of rose, and like maybe I was on some entheogens, just hearing them talk about it. So I expect nothing less this year with this amazing lineup. There's 33 herbalists and plant people like Rosemary Gladstar and Matthew Wood, Mary Blue, Margie Flint, and Kat Meyer, and so many more. So there's more info about the event. Click the link in our little blurb below. You can get registered there. It's March 18th through the 20th. And if you purchase the all access pass, we get a percentage, like a pretty hefty percentage of the sales that anyone who uses our unique partner link will be also supporting the podcast. So it's a great way to show your support for the podcast, and also a great way to support Sarah Artemisia and her hard work of putting this all together, and a great way to be nourished by the plant people and really soak up their wisdom and get to savor all of these great talks. So check it out, and we hope you enjoy the episode today. Thanks for listening.
Okay, so today on the Plant Cunning Podcast, we have Peter Mark Adams, who is the author of a number of books that more recently, The Power of the Healing Field, which is a really interesting book about energy healing and different modalities, which I think are very interesting and helpful for especially herbalists and any healers. So Peter, how are you today?
Oh, great. And thanks so much for asking me on your show. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, it's an honor for us. I mean, I first heard about you, I think, from a couple of years ago. The game of Saturn was very big in certain circles. And, that was a really interesting thing. And then this is like totally different, totally different side. But it also really interesting and a lot of good stuff in here. Okay. So I guess for our first question usually is, how did you come to the plant path?
But I guess you're more of an energy healer. So how did you come to the path of healing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was one of those weird kids, always kind of connected to some other dimensions and states, but I really got connected to energy work first. Okay. And for instance, I studied Shotokan karate with a very distinguished UK master. And that taught me enormous about inner energy and the cultivation of energy. And then I did Tai Chi and various meditative techniques. So all that was like going on from my late teens, well into my middle age. And then it was very late, actually, a friend of mine introduced me to Usui Reiki. And that's really when I switched from esoterica into the path of healing fully on. So that was enormously influential because the teacher I had then was so powerful. She had an immense Kundalini energy herself. And the phenomena around her, especially with someone a bit sensitive like myself, the phenomena around her was absolutely astounding. I can give you some cases of that if you like.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, the first time I met her, we were sitting there with my partner, Kenzie, and we're just talking about the healing path and Reiki, what it was, how all of this. And I started getting these blobs of green floating in front of my visual field. Okay. And I was rubbing my eyes. And I was looking at the window. There's nothing there, I looked back at her and it was getting worse and worse. And these blobs were starting to come together and coagulate. And I only realized later that it was third eye was opening because of the amount of her own intense energy field. And finally, I could see a green, like oil paint almost, flowing over her arms and shoulders, face, but mixed with a very, it's an emerald green, and mixed with a sapphire blue. I was and then all around her, there was this dense green aura emanating 10, 12 centimeters from the body. So that was my first exposure to the path of healing and Reiki energy, and from then on, whenever I encounter healers, dedicated, especially Usui Reiki healers, I can see this green in their aura. So that has become very much part of the,
Yeah.
It's better than an argument just to see it yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
Direct experience trumps everything.
I'd say one thing though about Reiki is lots of people get it, but they don't have great experiences with it. I just want to say one thing to everyone who wants to get it or gets it. You need to spend the first 10 days to 2 weeks and you practice Reiki every single day on yourself and on your dog, your cat, anyone who'll, open themselves to it. And if you do that along with basic detox, basic purification, you're going to feel the energy real strong in your hands from then on.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit more what Reiki is and how it works and how to access it.
First of all, I want to contextualize it. I'm in Istanbul, right? So from here to Japan, hand healing is a thing, it's known. Okay.
Yeah, even here,
there's a huge background.
Yeah.
It's in the Sufi traditions, it's in Central Asian shamanic tradition, all the way to Japan. So the thing that makes Reiki unique is its penetration into the West. That's all. Okay, that was the shift that happened, and it was through Hawaii because of the US presence there, and then into the mainland, So a lot of people think that it's something completely unique, and it isn't, but it's a valid lineage. That's what I want to say, because there's a lot of things now which advertise themselves as Reiki, but probably more accurately described as Reiki-like.
Okay.
I don't say they're good or bad. I just don't know. I mean, I hear good report from most of them. But with the Usui Reiki, I mean, Usui was a Tendai Buddhist. That's to say, he was into energy work, dedicated meditator and everything. And this came to him. So it's, he said, well, it's not my energy, and that's the thing with Reiki. It's not your energy. You just put yourself forward as a channel, and then you let go. You don't have anything in the outcome. Okay, right. That's important. Otherwise, because it's dead easy to shift from doing Reiki to start channeling your own energy. And that's bioenergy, that's another thing, or it's therapeutic touch or any of those modalities. They're fine, but you have to know how to replenish your energy with those techniques, because you're using your own energy. And you have to know when to stop, because otherwise you'll run down like a battery. Okay, Reiki doesn't have any of those problems. It's straight in through your crown chakra, out through your hands. Okay, that's it. So I say it's spiritually guided, and that's the big step that most of us have to take, is to acknowledge that the universe is a living cosmos, that there are many forms of consciousness and sentient awareness in and around us that we're not aware of. And I will show you a photograph of, in fact, I think I sent it to you, of the Reiki energy in manifestation externally. That was invisible to me when I took that photograph. I couldn't see anything. It was only when I got one of the first digital cameras back in 2000 or so, and that's what I took that photograph with, the simplest plastic digital camera on the market, Only when I uploaded those images that we saw the huge orange glow of this energy, which if you look closely at the photograph, it has structure inside. And a couple of the people are like illumined, like almost a halo effect around them. And then I took because when I took the photograph, if you can imagine standing in front of a mirror, right, with a flash camera, and you take a photograph straight at the mirror, the light just comes straight back into your eyes like that. And that's what happened to me that day. So I said, oh, that's right. What's wrong with the camera? I took another one, and another again, fourth time it came back, there was no flash. Oh, that was really weird. We had no idea that the energy had a density sufficient to reflect light, but was not visible to the naked eye. So we're looking at frequency here, which we don't really understand. Whereas, we fully understand the frequencies employed in energy healing, right? Which I can just briefly outline if you like, Every part of the body emanates an extremely low frequency electromagnetic field. And the frequency range is between 0.5 to 50, 60 hertz per cycles per second. Okay. And as you sweep that range, with electromagnetic frequencies, it has a curative effect on people. So there's a mainstream medical technology like that, PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic frequency. And, if you have a broken arm, they can wrap a blanket around it, which has the electrical lines through it. And they set up a pulse running through that frequency range, and it heals quicker than it would otherwise. Okay. So the hands of energy healers also emit the same extremely low frequency electromagnetic pulse across that range, sweeping. When you do that kind of healing with Reiki, the amplitude of the waves is up to 1,000 times greater than normal. Okay. So that's where the acceleration effect comes from, So Reiki, there's been, in fact, a recent medical study put out has shown that it has an enormous benefit in pain relief. They did a clinical study. I just read about it a few weeks ago. So there's an increasing crossover now between allopathic, as you call, and complementary techniques. You're seeing them starting to blend together. It's taken decades, but it is happening.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of the leading hospitals now have Reiki in the hospital. It's an option over there. And the reason is that people love it and it works. So, so there's also a good physical basis for it. But of course, the spiritually guided part of it is problematic in Western cultures.
Right. Right.
So we're not there yet.
So where does the energy come from?
Well, we're swimming in it. The whole universe is just that, energy, matter. And the remarkable thing is that through our sentient awareness, we're able to channel. So we can bring it into a focus. And when it's delivered in a focused way, it has this curative effect. So, if you have a cut, a bruise, anything, you immediately apply Reiki and it'll be gone. Okay, we've tested this so many times: cuts, bruises, any kind of pain, ache, even anxiety. It just is naturally, restorative. So as a preventive philosophy of life, it's wonderful. This is gonna. I treat my eyes get a pounding because I write a lot. I'm online a lot, and I'm elderly. I treat my eyes every morning and every night, okay, for at least half an hour until all that like dryness, whatever, is gone. So I went along to the eye clinic. This was some time ago, actually, and I'd been there 10 years before, and they took eye scans. They still had the color images, and he looked at those and he looked at the new ones. And he said, there's something wrong here because these later ones are better than 10 years before.
Wow.
And he was like, no, that's not actually possible. Whatever you're doing, just keep doing that.
Yeah, they don't want to know. They just keep doing it.
Yeah, just keep it.
That's so cool.
We had a lot of doctors actually coming for, energy technique training. There's the crossover is happening. It's happening amongst psychiatrists, psychotherapists, and it's also happening with medical doctors. And like the nurses and healthcare workers have been using therapeutic touch for decades.
Right.
So these things are not as far apart from each other as we tend to think in our more pessimistic moods.
Right. I guess the main thing is that they contradict those fundamental precepts of material reductionism.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, very much so. And that's a big problem still. I will say one thing. I mean, my academic training is in philosophy, but it was real hardcore, logical, analytic philosophy. I did that stuff, 2 years formal logic and everything. But I noticed that now that from the late 70s, early 80s to today, panpsychism, for instance, wouldn't have been even considered then. Now, international conferences of, professional philosophers from universities are meeting precisely and only to discuss panpsychism. So, there is a quiet revolution going on. And boundaries and borders are starting to come down. And for instance, just last week, there was self-simulation hypothesis interpretation of quantum mechanics, right? A new approach which deems the universe as self-consciously aware and evolving itself.
Oh, like the Gaia hypothesis almost?
Wow. And this was in the Science Journal. So, things are changing. We just gotta keep to the track. We were right.
Right. That's what we keep finding out. We were right. But
yeah, science keeps like supporting that. And, you say in your book that like the healing arts, like the Psi doesn't challenge science. It challenges the mainstream understanding of consciousness and reality.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I think when you get the positive results, when you get the positive results, people don't argue. They only argue when it's like a philosophical conundrum, and they'll argue forever.
Yeah.
So, there's still the skeptic society, which is like a debating club.
Yeah.
But, you know, they don't actually, they're not hands-on with people. They're not, you know, trying to do something practical in the world. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't have consequences. It's just a logical argument for them. So
that's a good point.
There is, though, there seems to be a kind of disconnect between, well, like there's like the mainstream public opinion, and then there's like, you know, specialists. But it seems as though scientism is kind of like the state religion. I don't know if that's the true in Istanbul, but in the US, it kind of seems that way. You know,
it's absolutely like that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Rupert Sheldrake, for instance, has done how many decades of studies now about, you know, basically proving panpsychism is a viable, you know, biological model to understand plant animal behavior, you know. It's not as though they can refute those studies. That's the problem.
Right.
So it's just like a deafening silence, you know. They all know Rupert Sheldrake. He's the member of the same societies, the same universities. They all know what he's written. They've read his papers. It's just like this wall of silence, you know. So there's a lot of fear in that, in as much as the academic environment has become so competitive.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, there's like a fear about, you know, stepping into a controversial area, because the people who want your job will attack you through that.
Right.
Right.
You know, we saw this, I tell you, a good case. We saw this with John Mack. You ever heard of him? He was the head of Harvard Medical School, right? And he went down to the Esalen Institute, and he met up with Dr. Stanislav Grof, you know, another great research over there. And Grof was doing this holotropic breath work, which is really, really intense, like shamanically intense breath work with loud music and all of this stuff. And he said these people keep surfacing memories of being abducted by aliens. And he said to John Mack, you want to look at this? This phenomena is really astounding. So Mack said, okay, head of Harvard Medical School, right? And a, you know, fully qualified psychiatrist himself, he did a 20-year-long attitudinal study of people with post-traumatic stress disorder without a trauma. And as they worked through the hypnosis protocols and everything, again, persistent and consistent memories of this alien abduction phenomena. And he documented all this and published it at Harvard Medical School. Went mad. In fact, Harvard itself went insane about it. And they brought in a body of experts to review the study. They went through it, you know, with it's a model of its kind as a scientific study. But there's no way you're ever going to talk about this ever.
Right. You just can't talk about that. No.
Yeah, he just like he stepped on that third rail, which, you know, despite overwhelming, I mean, this is a really bizarre thing, I know, but it's there. I mean, we don't understand it, but it's there.
Right.
Yeah.
The problem is, whereas in like advanced physics, if it's there, they rebuild the theory. Okay. They very rapidly, you know, cycle through data. And whenever there's a controversial data, the theory gets rebooted. But when it comes to this stuff, sociological, psychological, anthropological, there's like a big cultural break, which is like, you know, we can't go that far. That's scary.
Hard block. Can't look at that. That's too real.
It's like the UFOs they keep filming, you know. Zipping here, zipping there, appearing, disappearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. You know, we can't say what they are, you know, but like, because, you know, like people have said, like Valet maybe, about how, you know, like fairy abductions have a lot of similarities to UFO abductions. It's kind of hard to say like what actually is the phenomenon, like what's behind the phenomena, but they're definitely they've been happening. You know, it's a real
human experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we live in a far weirder world than we're prepared to give credit for. And because of that, I think we're failing to understand fundamentally aspects of life. I mean, there's a real implication here that if we cannot acknowledge the range of sentient awareness in and around us, okay, then we look at the environment as though it's just a dead resource.
Oh yeah.
Like you can just mine it, you know.
Right. Extract.
It doesn't matter. It's just there to be extracted.
Yeah.
Right.
And, you know, so the debate around personhood, in my mind, is absolutely critical one to win. You know, where do we start expanding the horizon of our notion of personhood? Because once we do that, all kinds of legal and moral implications arise in respect to it, you know.
Right.
For instance, respect the personhood of trees or a forest, you know, because it communicates. I mean, we've got some real serious debates need to take place along these lines, but they have massive implications for our environment.
So that is I think it's really important, the idea of personhood. And I mean, this animistic idea. Panpsychism is, I guess, a little bit different, but and it's easier to see like trees maybe as a person. It's maybe a little bit harder to see a forest for a human raised in Western, you know, ideas as a person. But then there are also spiritual entities that you can't even see necessarily.
Yeah.
and it seems like the universe is just populated infinitely with beings.
Yeah, absolutely. Living cosmos, that's what we're part of. Yeah, I think part of the problem here is the narrowness of the Western conception of awareness. So there's like this, you know, what Charles Tarr called, you know, consensual range within which awareness should operate, and you don't see that in other cultures quite so much.
Yeah.
So the more traditional a culture is, it seems the wider the range of states of awareness and the knowledge you pick up in them is much more accepted.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So, and that's strange because we have had a counterculture, you know, since the 50s or 40s. I mean, it's nothing new age about it, right? It's like 100 years old.
Right. Well, even before then, I mean, in the U.S., you know, you had there was the occult revival, like you had the spiritualism, theosophical
transcendentalists.
You know, it goes back, but it's been kind of just pushed under the rug.
Yeah. So I think that is also absolutely pivotal. This acknowledgement of the dynamic range of our awareness and the willingness to accept evidence gathered in those extended states of awareness is kind of critical, because I think when you do that, the spirits of place inherent within landscape, within certain situations, suddenly, you know, they're unavoidable. You know, they're present literally to sight. Okay. So I think that's where we've been missing out a lot, is in that area. You know, I think like most drugs give a high, but they don't give insight at that level, unless you're looking at something like, ayahuasca.
Yeah, and you're doing a ceremony too. Like, I think the ceremony is the crucial part.
Yeah, and it has to be in honor or honoring place and the spirits of place. You know, there needs to be, it's like coming up to any stranger, there has to be respect.
Yeah.
If there's going to be communication.
Yeah.
You know, and unless you come at it from a place of respecting, then, you know, they're not going to show up for you. They don't want to talk to you. You know, it's simple as that.
Do you think you could tell our listeners a little bit about the different levels of consciousness, like from rational, instinctive, intuitive, psychic, like how, you know, there's different actual levels, and then how to access those different levels in your experience?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
How's that?
Cool.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay, so this is the
color.
diagram that's in the book in black and white.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And this is where I like started off when I started writing this book. Actually, book was initially written before Game of Saturn.
Yeah.
I like self-published it in 2014, and then it's been heavily changed and revised and expanded ever since. So this was the first attempt to try and model the dynamic range of awareness in terms of states, normalized states, psi, healing, shamanic, and mystical states. Okay. So let me move down. Okay, this is the one you were referring to in the book just now. And what I wanted to do with this is show that from the bottom, the pointed part where our rational awareness engages with day-to-day problem solving has essentially quite a focused and narrow range of awareness attached to it. But as we move back beyond that, we come more into the instinctive and intuitive realms of awareness. The field of consciousness we're accessing starts to grow wider, okay? And then empathic awareness and psychic awareness, I made these in yellow because these are the characteristic domains of awareness employed by a healer. Okay, so coming out of the rational and instinctive realms, they're essentially using an empathic state of awareness to connect directly with the client's awareness.
Right.
So, then in that state, you sometimes see this with like psychic mediums. Okay, they meet someone and they can immediately relate to that person's deceased family members who are present. Okay, so through empathic and psychic awareness, they're accessing this broader field of consciousness in which they're able to communicate with people who are deceased. And this is also a feature of family constellation therapy, by the way, which we'll talk about probably later on. And then beyond those states, you start getting into the mystical and spiritual states. That's all I wanted to say about that, actually.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting, that first diagram that you showed. You have non-dual there, and I've been part of like non-dual adjacent like groups and communities, and I can see how it can be maladaptive sometimes.
Oh, right.
You have
there's a much bigger problem in as much as when you start through meditative or breathing practices to change the frequency of your energy body, the energy can get real intense real quick. And one of the immediate byproducts of that is that it tends to surface any underlying emotional issues that haven't been resolved, like all the way back. So that the more intense your energization, the more intense will be the activation. And so now there's a delay here because, like, for instance, if you're doing it with like breath work, you're doing the breathing and the energy trails behind, growing. And then you get to a point where it starts to surge. And at that point, the energy is not in your control anymore. And it will surge through your body and tend to activate any underlying emotional issues. That's why we do rebirthing breath work. It's a non-cognitive approach to personal empowerment and development, but we carefully limit it. When we're doing it, it's a 40-minute session, and we know when the client has got enough energy, we just ask them to back off. And over the course of like 6 or 10 sessions, which may take a month or 2 months, then they have a positive change because they have cleared themselves off these emotional issues. Now, if you go into a meditation intensive and you're building that energy in a 24-hour to 48-hour period, you're going to get in serious trouble.
Yeah.
If there are underlying emotional issues and even day-to-day, like fights with your spouse or your neighbor, and then you come in and do these kinds of sessions, right?
Yeah.
You're like primed for an explosion,
Yeah.
You're primed, it's gonna, something can go wrong, very wrong. And, it just depends on how intense the energy practices are. And like, for instance, all day intensive for 7 days, you're going to blow a fuse.
Right. Yeah, that's been the problem.
You don't run a marathon after you've, get out of bed or come out of the pub and run a 20-kilometer marathon. You don't do that. You need to build up the stamina and the purification to a level where you can then take on an intensive, I think a lot of people just dive into them from a hectic work schedule. Say, oh yeah, week-long intensive, that's what I need, clear everything out, start afresh, and
yeah.
Bang.
Right. Yeah, you hear that with like, especially like Goenka retreats, people going off the rails at something.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lack of basic understanding of healing. If you've done enough energy healing, the parameters here. So you can like scale them up to think about meditative practice and even Kundalini related practices.
Right.
You're very much aware of people's different tolerances for higher energy,
Yeah, the Kundalini thing too is also can be dangerous. Like I've heard reports of people like apparently dying from their energy body being like going too quickly, like the Kundalini going too quickly. And so I've heard that it's best to only do it with a teacher and like under supervision.
Okay,
but
two things come to mind about that. One is the classic account of this is by Gopi Krishna, right? And he actually describes, he said he was on the point of death before somehow the energy balanced out. He was actually on the point of death. So a lot of people don't seem to recall that chapter.
Right.
But, secondly, I have to question the motivation.
Okay.
Why are you doing this? I mean, what's your frame of reference and understanding here? What is it you're trying to achieve? And how do you think Kundalini relates to that? This is a fundamental question. And I think a lot of people have a very, deluded idea that somehow it will lead to some great spiritual breakthrough or insight, and they'll carry that for the rest of their lives. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking.
Yeah.
But I want to say,
want to get enlightened fast.
Yeah. Well, look, who is getting enlightened then?
Right.
So it's putting this persona, this consumerist persona, into the role of being like this permanent container of spiritual enlightenment. And, the persona is not that. It's too shallow to handle the big issues. It's too shallow to handle fundamental question of meaning.
Yeah.
It just enables us to interface with physical reality. And if you put too much stress on it, it's like, whoa. Okay. So if that is your primary focus of meaning going into any of these spiritual practices, you're looking for trouble because your persona is not big enough for that stuff. Okay, so unless you have, I'm preaching here, so please forgive me.
Oh, go on.
Unless you have service orientation, you should leave it alone. And then you're not doing it for yourself, it's for something else. And that's big enough to contain it, okay? That's my perspective on that. I don't know. I hope that helps somebody.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, one of my mentors said for him, there was not a real momentum forward in his spiritual practice until he decided, well, I don't know if it decided or it was decided to help others. Like that was the orientation.
That's it. You immediately move from I to we.
Yeah.
And that shift is the fundamental shift in leadership. And once you've taken that step, you're in a different, your persona is a vehicle for that. It's not a thing to fill and constantly try and fill to make it feel meaningful, right?
Yeah.
It becomes the vehicle for a higher cause. And then it's in harmony, it's in right relation with everything, actually.
Yeah.
And that simple step brings you into right relation with nature, with the environment, with pets, neighbors, everything, actually.
Yeah, I guess the question after that is, so how does one get to that point where they're focused on helping instead of themselves, which can be hard to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's normally we all get there by falling over so many times. Enough with the bruises already,
Yeah.
Right.
It has to be a better way. So, we kind of find our way there. Some people seem to be born with it, I must say. They're just naturally there. I admire that.
Yeah.
No easy answer.
That could be partly like their astrological placements, or it could be like their past life, but it could be both.
Definitely past lives, I think.
Yeah.
And again, coming back to this bizarre alien abduction experience, a lot of the people who have that wake up with a sense that not just they exist, but I have a purpose. That's a very strange aspect of it, So again, our interaction with a much wider world of sentient intelligence is like the, 9/10 of the iceberg that remains hidden under the surface. Okay. But I suspect a lot of answers are hidden in that 9/10.
Yeah.
Like who runs the planet, for instance.
Yeah. Who is running the show?
What's going on?
Yeah, good question.
That kind of brings up another question I had about healing past life trauma. So if you have maybe uncovered through visions, dreams, maybe another healer or a psychic who tells you that you have this past life pain and trauma, what do you do with that? How do you address it?
Okay, so there's two aspects to this. One is it a present moment awareness of trauma? I mean, is there an emotional connection, or is it just an intellectual understanding that something wrong in my trajectory through life seems to have roots back there? So let me give you an example of each, if I could. So Kenzie, my partner, is treating this guy in a huge business training for vertigo, and the guy couldn't even stand on a chair. I mean, it was that severe. So she there's a clear presenting issue, vertigo. Starts doing the Eft tapping. All of a sudden, he's flooded with memories of jumping off the top of a building and dying in a past life. Okay, the vertigo was gone. He had the memory, well, it's okay. So that's one case. So he had a clear presenting issue to work on, emotional issue, right?
Very clear.
The other case is much more intangible. It's that sense that a lot of people have that their trajectory through life is somehow missing some gear points, changes or something, okay? And they may have picked up the fact that there's some past life trauma as a possibility, but it's not actually a presenting emotional issue for them, okay? Now in that case, a good way to explore that is the family constellation therapy, okay? And let me just briefly say, for those who don't know this modality, because I went along to a lot of these, and you can go along as a participating observer. You don't have to go along as I want therapy kind of thing. So there's two roles, one going along asking for therapy, another you want to see how is this conducted, what's it like, is it for me? You go along there, obviously there's a therapist, there'll be a couple of people who want the therapy, and there'll be a small group who show up, participating observers, right? First person getting the therapy will go around the group, who are complete strangers, by the way, and without announcing their issue, and they'll select them from that group. Like, will you represent my father or my mother or grandfather? And they'll put those people in the middle of the room, facing each other, facing away, far apart, near, So it actually mirrors the dynamic of that family as they understand it. And something really weird happens then. That person just sits down. They're not a part of the therapy at this point. Everyone standing in the middle of the room representing these family members who may be long dead and gone, doesn't matter, will suddenly feel an emotional overlay. So while you stay fully aware, consciousness, got your own thoughts, feelings, there's nothing strange, you'll all of a sudden have an emotional overlay of access to thoughts, feelings, and even posture and voice tone of somebody you've never met. And who may be long dead. Okay, so.
Yeah, and that's strange.
Well, what you've done, you've created a symbolic field that has been sufficient to shift everyone's awareness into the larger field of consciousness and recover the relevant information. Then the therapist goes around and checks on everyone's feelings, finds out where the blockage is to the flow of the energy, and it may be several generations back. So you just keep bringing on people until you find the locus of the problem. And then depending on the problem, you resolve it. Now, with constellation therapy, generally, it's some kind of ethical violation in the past.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not like just, a rock fell on my head and I'm traumatized stuff. It's, serious ethical violation. There may have been a murder. There may have been, theft of property.
Yeah.
Moving people off the land they owned. There's a lot of trauma in the land, just look at history. Yeah. So we're all coming through these historical lines, through past lives. We could be implicated ourselves in a lot of different ways. So family constellation therapy allows you to reenact the field as it was at the time of the causating event, resolve the ethical issue.
And how does the therapist resolve the ethical issue? Like,
that person has to ask for forgiveness from their heart. And the other person has to grant forgiveness from their heart. And that's sufficient to recode the field.
Yeah.
Okay. Forgiveness in a real way.
That's it.
Okay.
That's why we call it a knowing field. And also I call it a healing field. It is ethically bound field of consciousness that we're all swimming in. Okay. And that's why the therapy works.
It's so cool. I got to see that.
I just recognize that fact. My very good friend, anthropologist, Dr. Logan Sparks, is doing constellation therapy on the West Coast. And I'm sure there are constellation therapists around the US. I'm sure,
Yeah.
You can always just, find a local group and participate and observe. I did.
I would love to.
Yeah.
The intensity of the therapist has a lot to do with it. I went along to a very shamanic, Carl Jungian trained therapist, and she was really intense. Her constellations tend to be pretty intense. Other people are more like Bert Hellinger, more formal. So with all these modalities and techniques, you find someone whose style suits your own, you're comfortable with working with. That's important. That's actually very important.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess we should talk a little bit about some of the other modalities. Like EFT tapping seems to be one that anyone can do on themselves. It's easy. And you can just look up online how to do it. But the family constellation seems a little more, a lot more involved.
Yeah. Let me just show you another diagram if I could.
Sure. Oh, please.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. What I did with this, this is not part of the book. So it's pretty well first time it's shown.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
I went through all the modalities that I could think of, and I selected the ones that, you know, pretty well you can learn easily to practice on yourself. You could get training in, so you could practice on others, and you could even become a professional if you wanted. And I figured that most of the modalities fitted into one of 5 basic categories. So like you have the blue meridian therapies there. Okay, emotional freedom techniques. This the, you know, that's the one for me that really made the breakthrough. Gary Craig developed this out of thought field therapy, you know, back in the 80s. He demonstrated it was able to knock down post-traumatic stress disorder, something which psychotherapy cannot do even today. He demonstrated on Vietnam veterans in the early 80s. And as you know, there's absolutely no progress since then for the last 35 years to bring that to people who need it. But there it is. It's so easy to learn. There's so many classes online. Acupressure, similar to that. I'm thinking of Tapas Fleming's acupressure technique. And finally, magnet therapy. You actually run, you know, magnets across the meridians. So there's 3 meridian therapy techniques right away anyone can get into. And especially emotional freedom techniques is right there at your fingertips on the internet. So then getting into the breath work is a little more, needs more coaching, definitely needs coaching. Integrative breath work is kind of the gentle meditative style of breath work. Most of these systems use circular breathing. That's to say you breathe in and out continuously with no break. So that links up the energy field.
Yeah.
And you only breathe through the mouth or the nose. There's only 2 rules. When you exhale, you don't blow. You just allow it to come out by itself. It's so important. And when you come to rebirthing breathwork, of course, you're into an intense form of it. It's not for everyone, but for people who like feel that their lives have like stalled, or like somehow they just didn't get where they thought they should be in life, and yet they're not prepared to do like hours of talk therapy, you know, they don't have that handle on it. Something like rebirthing breathwork is probably going to shoot them forward, you know, in the space of like half a dozen sessions.
Cool.
You know, it's going to transform them. Because that's what I used to facilitate, rebirthing breathwork. And then holotropic breath work, we already mentioned, is really intense. Okay. And then moving into the mind modalities, mindfulness, of course, everyone knows, I guess, by now. Especially John Kabat-Zinn is associated with mindfulness-based stress reduction. He developed it from the Buddhist mindfulness meditation. Vivation, I trained with Jim Leonard, actually, the late Jim Leonard in that. And that's again, similar to integrative breath work, except the breath is just used to gently surface disruptions or blockages in your energy body, and then you breathe through them and relax, and through acceptance, they integrate again. So it's a very beautiful technique. And then EMDR, which is the eye movement desensitization technique, which is used now by psychotherapists everywhere. Okay. So they probably wouldn't accept it as part of energy healing. Oh, no. That's but anyway, I put it there because that seems to be the best way of understanding how it functions. And then we come to the hands-on healing modalities. Reiki, of course, we already discussed. Bioenergy, we talked about. You do need good training with bioenergy because you're using your own life energy to help others. And finally, therapeutic touch, which we don't really see much of it, you know, because it's generally healthcare workers are doing that. So
just intuitive.
Very much, yeah, very much so. And then come to the field modalities, mind connection healing, developed by my partner Kenzie. And in that, you insert a healing instruction into the energy field, so that then as you go through your day and your time, anytime a disruption or upset comes up, you can call that instruction and resolve it there and then. Okay. So you're working directly with the field with these techniques. Family constellation therapy, we just discussed. As you say, you need a proper therapist to run something like that. It's not, you know. And then what I've called spiritual healing, which is a huge area in which people work with a specific range of beings, gods, goddesses, entities. But I mean, it's probably the most ancient form of healing known to humanity.
Right.
You know, this is like the root of the shamanic healing is over there.
Mm-hmm.
You work with a lineage of spiritual beings, you know. So anyway, I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I love this. Thank you for sharing it. And I'm really interested in Kenzie's technique, the mind connection healing.
Yeah.
Mind connection healing, yeah. So can you give us an example of like how you would do that, or does she offer like classes or?
Oh yeah, she's doing it all online now.
Nice.
Yeah, you just go over to mindconnectionhealing.com and you know, she's got videos there. She got the first class this weekend, actually. Yeah, on Saturday and Sunday, she's going to be training people how to, they'll actually internalize the instruction and they'll work on stuff over those 2 days this weekend. Yeah, I mean, you've seen the stories in the book.
Yeah,
they're amazing. You know, so that's wonderful technique. I mean, this is 25 years of daily energy healing work, in which she sees 2 or 3 clients a day up to the last 25 years, really.
Wow.
And evolved this technique from that experience, from that base. So, yeah, that's really something. I don't know. That I'd recommend mindconnectionhealing.com. Go look at it, you know, check it out and write to her. You know, she does one-on-one sessions online and she does the training. But we always say to people, get the training.
Yeah, because then you can
empower yourself, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are about these last few ones that focus on the field. And we talked a little bit about the field, but I think it's still maybe a little nebulous for some folks.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Because it is nebulous.
It's pretty nebulous. Absolutely agree with that statement. Let me give you another diagram then, if you can tolerate it.
I'm a visual learner, so I appreciate the diagrams.
Oh wow, okay, you'll love this one.
Yes.
So this addresses this issue of when we're talking about especially the healing field. What do we mean? So on the left here, I've got the personal fields of consciousness, and mainstream therapy recognizes, of course, present moment awareness, biographical memory, and the biographical unconscious, basically. As a result of our healing work, there is absolutely no question in our mind that beyond that, we store memories of what we've called perinatal memory. That's to say, in and around the birth process and in and around the time within the womb. Okay, they exist within your deep memory, and they can have an enormously influential effect on how you later on in life react to things.
Okay.
And you know, very often that connection is not clear to people. Obviously, it's so deep. And I think you will have seen some examples in the book of how people's experience in the womb subsequently affected all their lives.
Yeah,
you know, it's a real
one example that just popped in my mind is the person in the womb whose mother saw a snake in the kitchen and was so frightened of the snake. This person had never even seen a snake in their life, but they were petrified of him.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Isn't that wild?
It's really wild. So beyond that, then you start hitting the memories of past lives, and especially traumatic deaths in past lives. I've had a huge influence on people's subsequent, you know, behavior and what they could and couldn't do in life, what they could and couldn't achieve. And this is not even the end of it, because backing all of this is the familial history. Okay. And you often find that people have traveled through that familial history to get born into this life. So they really do carry traces from quite extensive depth of time. And beyond that, of course, you have ancestral memory. And then beyond that, we seem to pitch into what I've called the universal field. But I would want to say that I think there's a point of environmental memory as well, that because we live engaged in a particular environment, we have a connection to karmically and in terms of what we do day to day.
Yeah.
So this is by no means everything, but it's pretty well everything we come across in energy healing is covered with these different dimensions. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's really, for healing purposes, that's the field.
Yeah. Cool.
That covers everything. Okay.
So does it help to look at the field as a person, or, I mean, it seems conscious, at least in some way, but.
Well, you can think of the field as dreaming us.
Okay.
That'll probably be more accurate.
So is the field God? Is the field the source, or is it some like something in between, or?
I don't know. Nobody can answer that, because panentheism, of course, posits the notion of a creator outside of
right
everything, but that's theological. It's not, it's way beyond anything we can ever begin. I mean, there are gods. You know that through the higher yoga tantra and all those Vajrayana traditions and various other traditions, multi-dimensional beings, but they're not God in the like Judeo-Christian sense of that.
The Godhead. Well, well, then something like in Hindu traditions, maybe like there's one God that symbolizes the all. Yeah.
Well, you can say that if the universe is totally alive in all aspects, it's a total living cosmos in all dimensions, and that it is self-aware and self-propagating and self-evolving, then we're just small passing dreams within that larger framework.
Right. Okay. That's
and that's as close as to a theology as you're ever going to get.
Okay.
Yes.
The only thing missing is thunderbolts directed directly at you for moral infringement. We don't have that. But we have karma.
So speaking of, spiritual entities and, these beings that are unseen for the most part, as we're opening ourselves up to these other, other beings and levels of consciousness, like, how do we protect ourselves from maybe some of the more malignant, or even just like not even ill-intentioned, but harmful spiritual entities that are out in this world?
Predators. Or parasites.
Okay. They're pretty rare, first thing. In most happy people will never encounter them. You need to be getting into some serious, like, grimoire sorcery. You need to be poking around in dark places. Gotcha. And then it can happen to you. There's no question about it. And you may also inherit certain spiritual presences of a dark nature through your karma, through your family line, or through your past lives. Okay. So, in those cases, you need to deal with karma as karma. Because I don't know anyone who's powerful enough to take on those entities. So, when people start messing with the grimoire stuff and poking around in dark places, those entities and beings don't have a timeline bound by birth and death in the same sense we have.
Yeah.
And if you go and commit yourself to them for some material gain, then that contract will stay in place as far as they're concerned.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, that seems really obvious, but also looking at certain corners of the culture, it's becoming increasingly common that people are poking around in those corners and making those contracts. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, not scary, but
it's
unsettling.
Disturbing. It's disturbing. And I have people coming to me saying, can you clear us of this?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I can't. I don't have that kind of power.
Yeah.
You're meddling with karmic stuff here, and there's the best hope they can do is to get into a life of service and align themselves with higher order beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the best thing they can do, and I think certain of the Buddhist lineages retains a certain skill in dealing with entities like this.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the indigenous societies, cultures, ayahuasca, which is both a higher order being as well as a plant, as well as a ceremony, right?
Right.
Capital ayahuasca, capital A, is a being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, ancient being. Okay, so those kind of beings are on the right level to handle this stuff. We're not.
Yeah.
So when you align yourself in a positive way with these beings, you kind of come under their protective umbrella. And as long as your alignment is how you live and how you serve, then that umbrella is there, and not just for this life, for all the conceivable lives, because those entities, those beings also don't have a bounded
that's cool.
timeline, right? They're like multi-dimensional entities caring for certain aspects of sentient life. That's what they do. And when you align yourself with that purpose, you're aligned with them. And that essentially was what clergy was attempting to achieve.
Right.
Those initiations at Eleusis aligned you with higher order beings, which had local names of like Demeter, Persephone, okay? But they're actually higher order beings in multidimensional space with certain responsibilities. And that's why the ritual, the mystery initiation rituals were seen as a foundation stone of civilization itself, because they had an ethical dimension to them. Okay? You cannot align yourself with these beings without a certain higher order ethics.
Right. So there's these like higher level spiritual beings. There's some that are more of the dark and some that are more of the light.
When you say dark, they're parasites, basically.
Yeah. Gotcha.
They're not evil. I mean, a tiger in your living room is not evil, but you don't want it there, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's the kind of same thing with the things we call demons are just energy parasites. They attach themselves to your energy body. They will make you deluded.
Yeah.
To generate the coarse, crude energies that they feed on.
So how do you, as a energy worker, healer, if you interact with somebody who has a parasitic attachment, how do you protect yourself? Or can you do anything for that person, like who maybe hasn't made a contract with, somebody, but they just have had a trauma and then something attaches themselves to them in that weakness?
There's an essay I wrote. It's on my academia.edu site. And it's called Lord of the Flies.
Okay.
It's the phenomenology of a possession. I didn't put it in the book because it's disturbing.
Okay.
But there's a case where I try to deal with a situation like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And eventually, I realized that this is a multi-generational thing. That the entity is firmly locked into this line for parasitic purposes. that it's capable of assuming forms, shapes, appearances from that person's unconscious. So it appears, it makes itself presentable.
Jeepers.
And it attaches to them sexually.
Oh God. Yeah. So,
Okay. But it's not that. It's not that at all. That's all illusion. The thing is energy parasite. And you know, it's anyway.
Yeah.
This is really dark stuff.
Yeah.
The essay is there for those who want to get into it.
Okay.
Okay. And I wrote that essay. I got his permission to write that essay to detail the case because I thought it was important that somewhere we had a record of this.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, especially acknowledging the different stages of possession. There's like 4 stages. Okay. And so you can, you know, you can begin to see the signs of it before it gets too far.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
like
really important. You know, like people waking up with cuts and bruises on them.
Yeah.
A run of accidents at the home, things broken, miscommunications. These are all like the early stages, and then it starts becoming kind of obsessional.
Yeah.
Obsessional patterns of behavior, and then it starts getting into the full possession, you know. So anyway, I documented all this to try and give people anyway somewhere a reference of a phenomenology of possession, and it's on academia.edu. I really didn't want to publish it, mainly because, of course, it's so dark, but also because it's so infrequently encountered.
Yeah. So I guess
it's not mainstream. Really, in 25 years of energy healing work, I encountered one case like this. There's one case in the book where we accidentally removed a sorceress spell off someone. Okay? It went into the ground, and the dog got it. Dog was paralyzed for 2 weeks. Finally, we were free of it, you know. But from that day on, we said, no, we can't deal with this. We don't know enough about these entities to deal with them effectively. And you never know what strength they have going into it.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the cases, you know, because we're like a network of healers very often, you seldom just yourself. I escalated it right up to somebody who's very spiritual, you know. The entity threatened her.
Wow.
It says, you know, you meddle with this, I'll come after you next. So, you know, there is stuff out there, but it's tied up with a lot of very, you know, dark and twisted things.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't affect most of us at all.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
And for God's sakes, never just think you can take it on and deal with it for someone.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that's risky. You know, it's very tempting to do it, but it's, you know, until you've actually, there's a much lower level of energy parasite, which is somebody is having an operation and somebody dies in the hospital, and then, you know, in like fear attaches itself to their energy body.
Yeah.
And that's easily resolved. You know, you do the energy protocol, and like angelic beings will come and take that person where they have to go. You know, that's it's not problematic in that sense.
Yeah. And like miasma, like being like, yeah, those negative feelings kind of, attaching yourself. So that's also part of why like it's helpful to have a spiritual practice, because they don't do that. But there are those lower level things that happen a lot more frequently too, as opposed to like the demon possession. That's something that you're hardly ever going to come across, but the lower, those lower things are more likely to happen.
Yeah. And also, if you're living on a particular tract of land, you may be sensitive to anything that's happened in the past there. You know, and you may want to clear that, for instance.
Yeah.
You know, there's certain places which have a darkness somewhere in them, you know, and you may want to clear that. You may want to commune with the land, find out what happened there, and then do something by way of restitution, for instance. You know, this thing about acknowledging a wrong and doing restitution is fundamental to the field.
Totally.
Because in the book you say that the field is ethical. There's a an ethical
harmony. The field is love. The field is love. That's what it is. So anything that disrupts that is jarring within it. And the most jarring thing are ethical violations within the field, of course.
Yeah.
We're all in the field. So ethical violations jar connections, relationships, the thread of life itself.
Yeah.
So whenever you're restoring, you know, it's like, you know, if you're caring for a garden, you care for the field in the same way.
And I guess that is intricately connected with karma too. I mean, the way I see karma is it's like consequence and like the tracks in space, like the habit, you know, what you do builds up, it accrues momentum.
Yes. Yeah.
So like if you do those ethical betrayals, like, you know, something like that messes up your karma as well as the people that you betrayed, but it messes up the whole field too. But and then it gets into those questions of like right and wrong and like who is acting? Is it the field acting? Is it us acting? Is there I don't know.
Well, the field acts. I mean, one of the real insights that I think Rupert Sheldrake brought to this thing when he calls the field a morphic field, right?
Right. Yeah.
But you know, he was trying to account for the transmission of behavior within certain species, right? So he was saying like the birds flying together in perfect synchronization.
Yeah.
They're obviously within a field.
Yeah.
But he went beyond that and said the field propagates an effect. And he called that morphic resonance. So, you know, the field isn't this passive thing. It is propagating its effect. And that's why serious ethical violation in the past has an effect now. It's propagating forward. And that's why the remediation of that is so important. Stop that propagation.
Yeah. So do you see energy healing and these types of modalities as mainly working on sort of ethical violations and like those kinks in the energy body? And how does it like differentiate? Like, so I guess my question is, how do you know when it's something for energy work, energy healing, or if it's something for like allopathic medicine, for like psychoanalysis, or like herbalism or something like that? Like, how do you know, like, what are the right types of problems for energy?
Okay, let me just address that. It's an important question. I made some notes about this because I knew you would bring it up, and I thought this is something we have to be very careful about what we say.
Yes, because we're not medical practitioners, and we're not
exactly
diagnosed disease.
I'm not either. So I want to say there's nothing better than allopathic medicine in an emergency.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That's important, you know. We also have to recognize that the body is naturally a self-healing organism. Okay, so if it is not healing itself, then we need to look at some lifestyle factors which are inhibiting it.
Why it's not healing itself. Yeah.
So that, I mean, in our experience, one of the biggest reasons is some emotional disturbance. So like you'll find, like Kenzie says, you know, if somebody comes with a presenting issue, the first thing she said, when did this start? And what was happening then?
Yeah.
Were you upset?
Yeah.
And as soon as she gets that, cleared that upset, the physical issue goes.
Wow.
It's as simple as that. So we're not saying, we're not doctors, we're not diagnosing, we're certainly not prescribing.
Yeah.
This stuff is adjunct to allopathic medicine. Sits on the side, doesn't replace it. We don't deal with people who are under psychiatric supervision. Okay, you know, we certainly never recommend anyone to stop taking whatever drugs they've been prescribed. And for certain types of disorders like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, psychosis, and we do not deal with those. That doesn't mean the energy healing techniques don't work with those things. They do. But as energy healers, we're not equipped to support people through that process.
Yeah.
They need a professional context for that support. You know, if they get suicidal one night, you know, we're not there, you know, we're not equipped to deal with that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought it was so positive. So many psychotherapists, psychiatrists are also using energy healing techniques. And you can always check on that, you know, before you go to those people and find ones if you're looking for that. So that, yeah, if you don't have this emotional issue, then diet, exercise, and general happiness and fulfillment in life. These are the real things that affect people day to day in our experience.
For sure. Yeah.
So we tend to think of a lot of energy work as a maintenance or preventative exercise. So like doing Reiki every day for me is rejuvenating. Okay, you know, but also if I, you know, stub my toe, cut myself, bruise or whatever, it's right there, first aid, you know, the best you can get. You may still go to the hospital to have stitches, whatever, but by then the healing, you know, will have started already. You will have staunched the bleeding, for instance. The bruise won't come out as bad. You may still have to have a bone reset, but, you know, that's another thing. You won't be in agony. So, you know, the way you work with these techniques perfectly complements allopathic medicine in many ways. And as I was saying earlier, they're not sealed off from each other. Increasingly, you're seeing levels of crossover, which we wouldn't have dreamt of 20 years ago.
Right.
Reiki in hospitals, EFT amongst psychotherapists and psychiatrists, and major clinical studies showing Reiki is effective in pain relief, or EFT is actually knocked down post-traumatic stress disorder in just 3 rounds of tapping. You know, it's unbelievable.
Amazing.
It is absolutely amazing. And yet, you know, how many people are dying each year from, you know, veterans from post-traumatic stress disorder? You know, why? Where's the inertia? You know, that's why I love to talk to people through the podcast. You know, these techniques exist out there. They're not a threat to allopathic medicine.
Yeah. And EFT is something that anyone can do and learn how to do in 15 minutes.
Real fast. Yeah. And without spending a cent, you know. It's free.
Go to YouTube.
You know?
Right.
So anything else on that?
Not
really. I mean, that was the basis. Like, for instance, if somebody has persistent small back pain, we often find that's connected with money worries. Just an example. So when you attack the underlying fear or anxiety, you get very quick relief or repair of the physical organism.
Yeah, and I guess part of it is like addressing the worry, but also like addressing the symptom, but also addressing the reason that you have money worries too. Could be.
Yeah, there may be emotional reasons for that as well.
Yeah.
Poor relationship with authority, poor relationship with money can have deep-seated emotional causes. You know, we looked at the layers of consciousness there. All kinds of issues in your family back whenever around the issues of money and relationships to power. I mean, these are the perennials of human experience.
For sure. So to sort of wrap up this amazing conversation, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to, you make a comparison or distinction between the good life, the pleasant life, and the meaningful life.
All right.
And you touched on that a little bit, like having a life that lives in service, that you live in service will lead to health and happiness. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit.
I mean, this was like classic positive psychology, these 3 steps. And what they've figured out is that you need to have all 3 in play to feel fulfilled in life. So the pleasant life is enjoying those good things. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's all you have in life, there's going to be a very,
not pleasurable
unsatisfactory life. Yeah.
If you're only chasing pleasure, then it actually is less pleasurable.
Yeah, absolutely. It just wears off after a time.
Get bored.
So it begins to become meaningful in the next step up, which is engagement, really. And when I talk to people, I find that very few of them have a good sense of what their strengths are. Okay, so I really recommend people to go and do one of these self-assessment questionnaires, strengths. There's a couple of them online. Do one of them, have a look, do another one, have a look at that, compare them, figure out what it is that you really do well, and then start to engineer your life to do more of it, more of the time. That's, it's not like a sudden switch.
Yeah.
But until you recognize those strengths and where they can be at play and start moving into areas where you really start using them on day-to-day basis, that's where you start getting some real big satisfaction in life coming out, Yeah. And then beyond that, the third movement is into this area of meaning. And for me, it's irrevocably bound up with ethics and with leadership. So the more that you shift out of the I, which, as I said, is a poor vehicle for meaning.
Yeah.
It's a fine vehicle for dealing with day-to-day stuff, but on the issue of meaning, it's very poor. And as you shift away from I to we, to the service of your family, to your community, or what you can do for others, you all of a sudden find yourself in a kind of transcendent space relative to your persona. It's like you've entered into a larger dimension of meaning, okay, in which the persona is back there, and it does this job. But actually, the fruit of life itself is in this wider merging with community.
You become identified more with the field than with
absolutely what it is that. Yeah. You come into alignment essentially. And I would say there's a fourth step beyond that, which is this alignment with the higher order ethics and those higher order beings, which doesn't feature as part of positive psychology, obviously, but it's there for a lot of us.
For sure.
Your eyes to see
Yeah.
So how those deities appeal to you, varies enormously, but there's certainly I think I have an anecdote in the book. I went along to see Tom Kenyon once. I didn't know anything about him, except that he had these beings called the Hathors. And, I was like, what?
You're like, all right, bud, whatever.
Deities or something?
Uh-huh.
My eyes had rolled up, So I went along with open mind, and I sat there and he started singing. He's got this multi-octave voice, beautiful. And then all of a sudden on the apron of the stage around him, there's these tall columns of light formed. They were like, I don't know, 4 or 5 meters as well. And then they drifted off the apron and up through the auditorium and disappeared, I thought, wow, you don't see that every day. What was that?
Oh, yeah.
At the end of this thing, somebody from the audience asked him, these Hathors, what do they look like? He said, oh, when they manifest, it's as tall white columns of light. I was like, wow, that's it.
Wow.
Strange thing is, I didn't get any emotional or power effect from them.
Yeah.
They were just coolly there. And obviously he has a conversation with them about spiritual evolution on the planet and this and that. I only say this because I didn't engage with those. I don't engage with Tom's work. I don't engage with those beings, but I saw them.
Very cool.
And that's a very rare thing. So I'm passing that on because I experienced that. They were there. There was no doubt about it. and they seem to have a very high frequency.
Mm-hmm.
I saw them, but obviously everyone I was there with hadn't seen them. I went with a group of people. Nobody else had been aware that they were there, but they were there.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So these higher order beings definitely exist, and they have high frequency energy. And I think in initiatory contexts, and this used to be true in Europe of the mystery initiations, is now true still in the Indo-Tibetan deity yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Those initiations are immensely powerful. Like they will give you a spontaneous experience of enlightened awareness for that, time, maybe just half an hour, but you'll get it. The rest of your life will be spent trying to recapture that. Because we don't have the energy body to sustain these states.
Right.
We just don't, but to taste it and to know it changes everything.
Yeah, I think what you just shared is so important about, living a meaningful life. And so many people are searching for meaning, they're on.
They don't seem to generate meaning. That's the problem. They don't understand that meaning is generated. They're looking for it instead of generating it.
Gotcha.
Creating it, co-creating.
The persona is looking for it, and it's not to be found.
Okay, yeah.
Meaning is generated by what you do.
Ooh, yeah. That's,
and it doesn't come from any other place.
That's
not
so wise.
Facebook scrolling. You don't find, not Facebook scrolling. That's not how you find meaning. So are selling.
I'm assured you can find enlightenment on TikTok. Maybe Instagram.
Okay. That's what I do. So Peter, this has been amazing. Would you like to share with our listeners where they can find your book, and if you're excited about any new endeavors or what's ahead?
Let me show a little slide. I've got something else here. If I could just get it up. Bit of promotional screen sharing. So the Power of the Healing Field is the book, petermarkadams.com and mindconnectionhealing.com. There's training this weekend. Anyone wants to get empowered, it's there.
Excellent.
Cool.
Okay. So
thank you so much, Peter. This was so fun, and I learned so much.
I enjoyed it. It was great fun.
Thank you. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for being on the show.
Maybe another time.
Yeah.
Please, anytime.